There is an old adage, one that you might have heard from a grandparent or village wise person, the one that says, you get out what you put in, meaning your efforts are matched to some degree by the results or the output. Now, take our nonprofit, Pioneer Knowledge Services, who delivers this cool program that you're listening to right now, takes a bunch of effort that you don't even see. We hope that you obtain value from our efforts to deliver it to your powers of reason. Here is where you come in. You, the listeners. Make our efforts rewarded. Consider donating to keep us moving forward. Visit pioneer-ks.org and click on donate. Welcome, everyone. This is Because You Need to Know. Forward thinkers, please note that the content you're about to hear is dated, and the content that Jean-Claude talks about with the book is on the back burner.
Guten Tag, bonjour et bonne année. Mon nom est Jean-Claude Monney. So my name is Jean-Claude Monney. I'm a Swiss, French, and American citizen. I happen also to have an Italian mother. This is why I said bonjour. No, I live in a beautiful little town in north of San Francisco called Mill Valley, which is about 20 minutes north of San Francisco. The most interesting thing about where I live is I'm on the top of a national park called Millwood Park. And what is interesting about this place is that one of the first national monuments created by President Theodore Roosevelt, January 9, 1908. And for those of you who are not familiar with Roosevelt, he was one of the key architects of the United Nations. So during the war, there was a big effort to, unite nations to avoid any world war. And actually, in 1945, 49 countries met in San Francisco. Unfortunately, Roosevelt died that year, but they came here in the park to pay respect in a memorial. So there's a special place in the park reserved to that. So it's a place I go often because we have those hundred of years old tree, and it's absolutely magnificent. I think one thing that you might want to know about me is that I'm passionate about electronics and software technology as a key enablers to world progress. And if you go on my LinkedIn profile, you will see that's what I said about me, and did some interesting thing in my career from either being an entrepreneur. I started as an entrepreneur to pay for my studies. And then I moved to what I call being an intrapreneur, because this entrepreneurship spirit basically drove my career in major corporations like Motorola, Digital Equipment Corporation, and finally Microsoft. In 2017, I decided to elect the retirement age to actually reinvent myself. I went to teach at Columbia, created a course on digital transformation that I taught. Also, finally started to write a book. And I think it's very relevant to the field of knowledge management. It's actually not a book on knowledge management. The title of the book is going to be Amplifying Minds, and it's how to cultivate personal intelligence in the age of AI, which I think is going to be a very important subject as we go. I'm happily married, and I have 4 children and 4 grandchildren. I'm very well surrounded on our family front. It's a really nice thing to be able to give back to your grandchildren and to actually learn from them. And the key question I have for me, which I use in the book, is what should my grandchildren learn?
That's a good question, and I'm sure there's a lot of variations on what that would be. So, Jean-Claude, why write a book? Who is the audience? Who do you think is going to be compelled to pick this up?
Well, it's always a story. First of all, I'm not a good writer. I wrote, and it is why I never wrote a book, probably. Many of my friends, like Stan Garfield, is an excellent writer. I was actually doing a webcast at Came World 2 years ago, which was organized by Zach Val of Enterprise Knowledge. And I found Zach extremely interesting in the way he questioned people. So I decided to listen to some of his podcasts. And I discovered a lady called Mo Weinhardt, who is a director of knowledge management for a company called Mac 49, which is a VC company. I think she was extremely eloquent. So I reached out to her. She basically surprised me by the fact that she originally was a teacher, went into KM, and there's many ways to get into KM.
Yeah.
And she asked me, said, Jean-Claude, you've done so much in this field. Why don't you write a book? And I said, because I'm not a good writer. Would you be willing to partner with me on this? And I said, yeah, but are you a good writer? And I found out she was extremely good. Of course, writing a book, it was my first book, is like a new project. For me, the audience is what I call the rest of us. The audience, I can tell you what it's not. It's not a book for knowledge manager. It's for knowledge manager, but on their personal side. The question is, after you left education, you have guided learning. Once you leave education, you might get assisted learning from enterprises. So, for example, when I joined Motorola in 1977, I went into the Motorola management program. Thanks God, because I had no idea about management, marketing. I'm a nuclear physicist and electronic engineer. So marketing was not my core competency, but then I took a job of product marketing manager. Motorola gave me that education, enterprise assisted education. But then what do you do for your self-guided education? How do you continue to learn and grow? What methods do you have? What personal hygiene do you have? Something that I basically, through my career, I met some people that ignite that passion in me and this will to get organized, to have a personal hygiene. I talk about it in the book. The person was Mike Kami, basically the one that made me think about this.
What I hear is personal mission, your personal drive. What feeds you and what doesn't. Does that sum it up?
Sorry, it's the word is personal knowledge, continuous learning hygiene. The reason why I use the word hygiene is because we all do, have a personal hygiene, you wash, etc., or your health in terms of hygiene. But how do you do things regularly to learn? For example, do you learn from different sources regularly? Do you curate some of the things that you read? Do you summarize? Do you apply in a systematic way?
That right there, you just described to me what I think leadership is.
Well, that's a whole different subject. Leadership is the ability to bring people to do things and give the best of themselves. There is many different definition of that. My wife is an expert on it because she's an executive coach. I'm not an expert on leadership. I just want to say contribute to your ability to lead. And I like to take small example. So let's talk about AI, artificial intelligence, right? And we all seen the revolution of generative AI. AI literacy is a must. You cannot be a leader if you don't have literacy about a new subject. What I mean by literacy, at least understand the basics. There's still people that are so confused. I see that every day. I became the vice president of the Millwood Community Association. And I'm going to produce a free course every month to the community on generative AI because I realize people don't understand what it is. They have misconception and worse, they don't use it.
You're talking about the social structures of the Luddites, the ones that will not accept new technology because they're afraid. They're afraid you're going to take over. It'll wipe out the economy as they know it because people are going to lose their jobs. So there are those that are dead set about progress. So how do you bridge that? And that's what you're talking about. You try to provide materials, education, learning opportunities for them to start seeing the bigger picture.
It's not an either or that. It's also the people who don't have time or are ignorant. I want to again make a parallel with the internet.
Okay.
I was fortunate to go through major technological changes throughout my professional life and personal life. In the end of the 90s, when the web came out, I was already on the internet since 1981. So my first email was in 1981. In the end of the 90s, I was working at ST Microelectronic. I was a vice president of IT. I had to make the company understand the internet. So I started with the executive vice president, and I sat down with every single executive vice president, including the CEO, Pasquale Pistorio, and I made them touch the internet. So we opened a browser on their laptop, and for each of them, I did something that was relevant to their functional domain. That opened their eyes, and then we were able to create a course in the ST University. We had our own internal university to teach people. By 1998, 99, we created an open system center where we were teaching product manager search engine marketing, how to use keywords, because we had just launched the first website. I mean, everybody takes for granted website and all this. We created the first website, and then suddenly we had to tell the person that was doing the data sheet that now you have to use the keyword field and put this because the search engine will index these things, right? Fast forward to today, we have generative AI where the knowledge is democratized. So in 2000, the information was democratized. You know, the world is flat. You remember the famous book from Thomas Friedman? The world is flat. Okay, now the knowledge is there. So that means that all the explicit knowledge is available worldwide in many, many, many languages.
This is an expansion of function. If we go back to your example where you sit down with somebody and show them value that means something to them, handheld them to the experience in order to build, okay, this is good. I can use this. Oh, okay. So the fast forward motion has exploded from that first experience of hand holding somebody to a website and showing value to now where you're saying that generative AI will produce results beyond your own capacity that you didn't know of that could elevate everything.
Yes. And you know what is fascinating? The history repeats itself with the risks. So I'm going to be very transparent here and tell you about what happened.
Okay.
We created the first website, we created the intranet, and then I wanted to install the search engine. So we did an experiment, we did a search engine, and I had to present to the executive committee. And the CFO at the time, Mauricio Girga, asked me a very, very nasty question. You typed the word company confidential, and guess what happened? A bunch of documents came with company confidential. And he pointed to me and he said, this guy is dangerous. He's gonna, blah, blah, blah. And I turned back to him. I said, no, I'm not the manager of your people.
Yeah, right.
Today we talk about hallucination. It's the same story. Garbage in, garbage out at the time. So it took us 2 years to clean our mess before we can install the search engine.
In that example, though, he bird-dogged and pinpointed a huge issue. It's like anything new, you're going to have nothing but issues you have to kind of reconfig on the fly. Oh, we didn't think of that. Oh, okay, yeah, we got to fix that. All right, that's how things work, right? I mean, it's an iterative process any way you look at it. But I hear what you're saying, and I don't want to lose the listeners because I want to get back to something I had pulled up when you talked about the literacy piece. I want to define for the folks that in Cambridge Dictionary, literacy means, the first definition, the ability to read and write. The second one is knowledge of a particular subject or a particular type of knowledge. So when you're talking about raising literacy, and I want to say comprehension, but literacy, right, someone's abilities, that is a construct that is really evolutionary in itself, because if you don't have that mentality of increasing your literacy, then you're going to soon become a dinosaur. You're soon to become outdated, outgrown. If you're not literate, I hear you saying that the key ingredient is constant evolution. Is that a fair statement?
It's constant learning. I think you bring a good point about literacy, and I want to maybe go back to some.
Okay.
There is this word intelligence, but let's go human first. Intelligence spells with an S, and I think this is an interesting thing to think about. There are many different human form of intelligence. I mean, think about Marie Curie, scientist. Think about an architect. And so there are all these different kind of intelligence. In fact, in 1983, there's a guy named Howard Gardner, psychologist, that basically defined 8 distinct intelligence. Humans have different form of intelligence depending who you are. Artificial intelligence has different kind of intelligence. Pattern recognition is a particular domain of artificial intelligence. Robotic is another domain. So the first thing is when I talk about literacy of AI is to understand that there are different domains of intelligence. And then for the one that is really hitting us today, the generative AI, is understand that what comes out of a solution of generative AI is generated. It is not a regurgitating of a piece of text. Okay, that's not. So every piece of text or image or video that comes out of a generative AI system is uniquely created. By the way, that's why you can't copyright things from generative AI because the US copyright law is very clear, and it was tested, in the federal Supreme Court, is that you can only copyright material that is human generated.
Ah,
I think it's important that literacy, we have some basics there, and then help the people understand that the training of the data, which was initially the internet and books, etc., contained wrong things. And so hallucination is just a normal output. What I think it's probably a good thing to think of is that to apply the same rules when you seek knowledge to human that you seek knowledge to a system. So let me give you an example. If I'm asking you a question on brain surgery, knowing that you're not a brain surgeon, I would really question your answer. And so the ability to apply critical thinking is there. But you could tell me a wrong thing,
yeah.
right? Well, that's happened with generative AI. What is the message behind this? The message behind this is that, number one, you need to master the art of questioning. And I can tell you a little bit more about that. Second is generative AI is going to give you some proposed answers. You need to apply critical thinking to that answer, like you're doing with human. And once you get those 3 variables understood, you can become very good about it because better you are at the art of questioning, better output you are. In fact, in the future, the questions are the answers. Think really hard about this.
I totally agree with you because that is the only essence of comprehension and judgment that the human in the loop is the mechanism for. And I think that is an absolute skill. And I want to go back to what we originally had talked about. And I want to bring this to a small scope here is that what we're getting to is the intersection of personal knowledge and AI or tech. I mean, either way. But in the generative AI, everything is suspect, just as any information from anything should be. But how do you develop better critical thinking?
Yeah, so that's a chapter in my book, and there will be different answers for different stages of your life. And in fact, I just published an article on my LinkedIn newsletter, which is called The Art of Possible. It's about my grandchild that was learning about the art. And I was invited just to see what they had produced in art. And I found out that my 4-year-old grandson knew about cubism and Pontyism and realism. I was like, his way of questioning me when we looked at something, now it reflected why he had developed already some critical thinking because I do a lot of photography, I show him things, and he was asking me questions, which I did not really understand. Well,
Where is this coming from? Yeah, how do you even know this?
and I think there are ways of developing critical thinking at different stages. I mean, Jean Piaget, which is a famous Swiss psychologist that developed a methodology for that, which is applied by some school. You can basically research how to apply critical thinking depending on your stage in life, because I think that's important. More you would know about it. In fact, a couple of things that are important is this notion of common sense is extremely important. There's a famous story you can see on the internet right now regarding generative AI. If you ask generative AI how to make coffee, generative AI is a software construct that is in one dimension right now. We have to bridge the physical world and the digital world of knowledge. This will be coming so that the system will understand the environment around it. Is there a coffee machine? Is there coffee? Is there? So you don't answer the same thing
Right.
if you don't know your construct.
What you're saying is there's going to be a spatial element to consider all facets of the environment that will be interfaced somehow into the system.
Yeah, in fact, here's what I predict will happen, and here's what is already happening. When I present a generative AI, I show the state of the art today. And let me give you some points which are very important. ChatGPT-4 test UB, which is the National Conference Bar Examiner test for becoming a lawyer in United States. Okay, ChatGPT-4 passes 90% of the test. It was passing 15% of the test for Monster with GPT 3.5. So by GPT 5, it will pass 100% of the test. It passed 98% of the US biology Olympiad test, which is all the biology discipline. So you already have more knowledge into the system there than any human can have. So the next thing is that an experiment was done with an fMRI. An fMRI is a machine that captures signal of your brain. The experiment was to show an individual a picture, which was a giraffe, and capturing the signal, feeding this as an input to a generative AI system, and the generative AI to reconstruct an image. And guess what happened? The image is a giraffe. Not exactly the same, but close enough. So now, fast forward for this, my dream will become movies during my lifetime. So, what is the thing that I predict will happen? The biggest transformation is that physical world to the digital world through sensors. There is a revolution that is about to start about how sensors of all kind are going to be the input of generative AI system. And that's for me the biggest transformation we're going to see after GAI itself is that environment. So that we will have that physical environment. We could have a camera, we could have a sensor for pressure, for temperature, for anything. All these sensors going to feed the machine. That's where we're going to have a whole new world.
You're creating an environmental computing schema, a landscape, digitized landscape where the human is not the center of the universe anymore. We are a player in the game.
Yes, it's human intelligence and artificial intelligence in symbiosis. We have to create that symbiosis for the good of the humanity.
But is that the tipping point to where technology has the thumb up? Is it a tipping point to where the power shift will go from the human in the seat, the human in the loop, to the digital is driving?
Okay, well, so here you're touching the question of consciousness or not consciousness. I don't think we are, at least not in my lifetime, we're going to see systems that will have consciousness. But we will see systems that would be knowledgeable enough to help us as human there. We need to find what is the right question to ask. Is the question, will artificial intelligence replace human? The answer is no. Okay. Why? Because the human is far more than intelligence. A human is more than intelligence. Now, can artificial intelligence solution replace some human task? And the answer is yes. When we talk about the fear of AI on a job, and again, I invite you to go to one of my newsletters, there are three things. Every job is a sum of three tasks. So there are tasks that are repetitive. Those are primary candidates to be replaced. And who likes to do repetitive tasks? I worked in a factory when I was 16 years old during my vacation, where I was putting a little piece of brass and I was just doing something to that piece of brass for 2 weeks. I did the same thing. Okay. The automatic task will go. Second thing is that your task will get augmented. So think about the power of the first draft of generative AI. You want to write a letter, you want it to be, you want to make sure it is very inclusive, for example. So you ask generative AI to generate a very inclusive note. That's your first draft. And it's happened. You want a picture. I wanted a picture for my Christmas letter. It created a picture through a prompt in 1 second with DALL-E, right? There is augmentation of the tasks. And then there are tasks. I did some interesting thing is that I was looking at how many jobs for prompt engineering existed on LinkedIn. And there was, let's say, 10,000 in the US. There were none the year before, right? What we see happening, like with every technology, is a lot of brand new tasks that are created. So again, three things. Tasks that will be replaced, like with any technology, steam engine, electricity, any new technology makes replacement of tasks, augmentation of tasks, and then creation of new tasks. So if you are a leader in a company right now and worrying about the impact of AI, just apply this rule. Which of the tasks that my company is performing can be automated?
Yep.
And this is why the generative AI prime impact right now is in customer service. That's the number one function that is impacted by generative AI. Because who likes customer service? The turnaround time of the customer service agent is very high, and the knowledge half-life is also very short. That's another component that is happening right now. We have two phenomena. One, we create enormous amount of data daily. I think it's 300 million terabytes of data created daily, which means 90% of the data created in the last 2 years is all the data that we have. It's absolutely enormous. Then, at the same time, the half-life of the knowledge is decreasing.
Explain what you're saying. What are you saying by are you saying the value, the credibility, the usability?
The rate of innovation is exponential. Let's take a practical example. Let's say that you are a customer service agent. You are supporting iPhone 15, 15.1, 15.2, 15.3. You see, there is new knowledge created. So the half-life of the knowledge, if you have 15.3, what was on 15.2 is no longer important.
Not important, not usable, nobody cares, moving on.
Half-life of knowledge. That's why with design knowledge management system, you have to do a matrix, which is strategic, operational, and you have to put the half-life of the knowledge.
Are you saying we need retention policies in order to keep our data? Somehow we have to filter. Somehow we have to delete old stuff, right?
Yeah, so I think you're touching the point of knowledge. So when is knowledge management for me? Knowledge management is a process. The fact is that it's never been, it's still not considered as a function. Why? When you create a startup company, you create a marketing job, a CTO job, a sales job. You don't create a CKO job. It's not there. Now, is it important? Yeah, it's across all those functions.
Right.
Second of all, what is that process, the key element of this process? One is creating, reusing, growing, and retiring. You said, knowledge retention.
Yeah.
So I think you have this life cycle. I mean, it's interesting that when I was at Microsoft, I spent a lot of time with the person in my team responsible of search, because I was really all about statistics on search to understand what people are searching for,
right,
but also what is the knowledge. And we had data that has been never cleaned, that were more than 10 years old. So we went through an exercise, and if you leave that data, it pollutes the system. So one of the advice that I give people who are focusing on explicit knowledge in enterprise, and especially as they go with RAG, retrieval augmented generation, is to make sure that they have a data quality program. so that on an ongoing basis, they clean the data.
I think a lot of organizations skip that part or don't do it well. If everything is live data, if everything is at the top shelf, then you're right. It's absolutely two-thirds of it can be chucked and nobody would ever miss it.
Yeah.
But conversely, somebody has to make a data decision if this should be archived or not. There's got to be something that is in place that has a management and, like you say, life cycle process in order to keep it from piling up, or we're going to be covered with old stuff that has no relevance.
Yeah, it's interesting. So, as an IT person, responsible leader, I had to admit to archiving policies, European Union, US, etc. In my whole career, I'm talking about, at least 35 years, 40 years, okay? I had 3 or 4 times a question to retrieve information for legal requirement. So yes, you can do this kind of thing and keep the data for 10 years and so on. The cost of storage is minimum. The importance for me is to put the emphasis on strategic knowledge in the future. So that's the knowledge that you build innovation from, because innovation is the reuse of existing knowledge in a different domain. So innovation creates value, creates new sales, creates new markets. Operational knowledge basically reduce cost because you reuse something that you know how to do. It's more predictable in like if you do a project, you would have better ability to say it's going to be done on that specific date, on that specific quality, and so on. So we need to separate and that's one thing that I see many times people are getting confused or they don't apply the differentiation between strategic and operational. Knowing that operational knowledge with generative AI, the bar has been reset. So if you're a consulting company today, your bar is reset. Let me give you an example.
I'm having a hard time tracking the difference. I understand what you're saying. There's a difference between operational and strategic. But gee whiz, who's got the slide rule to figure that out? I mean, the relevancy of what is operational versus strategic can shift on a dime, I'm thinking.
Well, it's
All I'm saying is what's going to determine what's operational and what's strategic? Because I think you could reach into operational data to get strategic insights. No?
operational data to get statistic insight. Yes. So when it becomes strategic, solution becomes the question. It's operational when answer is the solution. It's how the human question the system again to make it strategic, very operational. But the ability to bring the knowledge is what needs to change. We have been focusing as an industry in a pull mechanism, which is we want the users to go to the knowledge. That's what you do when you use a search engine. What I think the value is to be able to push the knowledge in context. When you do that, you are really accelerating both strategic and operational knowledge. For some reason, I see many companies that use excuses of privacy policy to not do that. And what they confuse is the what versus the how. Let me take an example. Let's say that I'm a consulting company and I have a project with Bank of America, and I have another project with another team with Wells Fargo. And the two projects are about installing Copilot, take something very up to date. The question is, when you install Copilot and you are an engineer and you have to learn the configuration and so on, that's not competitive. That know-how should be able to be shared. Not that the fact that they're going to use Copilot to generate automatic profile of the consultant. It's important we put this element, strategic, operational, push and pull into a matrix and start to make some decision about where you invest. I work with large companies, and when I look at the investments, and I had this discussion with a client who became a friend of mine, is about search engine. Every company has a search, enterprise search, right? What are the search engine vendors doing? They said, oh, but you can use generative AI, you can use RAG, okay? What's the incremental value versus the cost?
That is unproven at this point.
The question you need to ask yourself versus, because if you think that through generative AI, the knowledge level has reason to be more available everywhere, the tacit knowledge is the one you should be focusing on.
All right.
I think in enterprise, we're not focusing enough in tacit knowledge. And I think as an industry, there's not enough solutions that are innovative enough to do that. Because as you know, people are busy, they don't want to share.
A query is only good if the data and information is expressed. That has no value for tacit knowledge unless we get a system in place that builds tacit knowledge. And that, I think I agree with you, is that most organizations will not put resources towards building a tacit knowledge bank in a good way. I don't think they just see the ROI anywhere in the near future, so they just say, oh, well, people come, people go, There's a lost revenue there that I think is bleeding most companies dry.
Yeah, and I would say, fortunately, communities of practice, the human solution is still the best solution today.
Yeah.
And especially when you go to the retirement. I mean, 10 years ago, there was a big retirement problem in the oil and gas industry. And these people were retiring going with the knowledge. So I think community of practice is still extremely important for the enterprise to capture the tacit knowledge.
I'll say that a community of practice, if that's your crutch of collecting tacit knowledge, you're not doing enough. Community of practice is as good as the people that participate in it. Not everyone that participates has the golden critical knowledge that the organization needs on some occasions. I think the community of practice is a great buffer to help, but I don't think it's a solution because I'll couch this, see what you think. I'll propose that unless you have a protagonist, unless you have somebody that, in my case, is a not interrogator, but definitely somebody that picks apart what people are saying to get to the deeper knowledge, the stuff that they don't have even on the surface of their own brain. Somebody needs to poke and prod in order to pull out the real tacit knowledge that could be proven to be a critical piece.
Okay, so I was fortunate to take a job as a chief knowledge officer at Microsoft when the knowledge management program was already in place for more than 13 years. And the strongest part of it was the community of practice. When I left, we had at Microsoft 100 community of practice with 56,000 people. The median time to respond was less than 1 hour for 30 of those communities from people that don't know each other.
Yeah.
So APQC has defined 3 categories of human knowledge to make it simple. Level of knowledge. One, you are a novice. You don't know nothing about anything, so you have to ask. Second of all is the expert. And then you have in the middle what they call the nexpert, the people that know enough about something and can answer to the novices. And the nexpert can ask the question, the intelligent question to the expert. So again, we go back to questioning. Is a fundamental domain to master. And it's extremely important. In fact, questioning, I would recommend to listen to Dana Kensey. Dana is an assistant professor at the London Business School. She has a talk about, she made an analysis of 2,000 entrepreneur question for VC funding. What is really interesting is that 67% of the question posed to the male entrepreneur were promotion-focused questions versus 66% of those to the female were prevention questions. As a result, male entrepreneur got 7 times more funding than female entrepreneur. Her TED Talk is fascinating. I think it's this whole questioning, for me, is a fascinating thing.
You keep leading like questioning is the answer for all things, but I got to say, if you're not listening, it doesn't matter what the question is. right? In order to generate new questions, you got to have the comprehension and just the juice flowing up here in order to create a question that applies or digs deeper. Yeah. You have to have that interchange. You have to have, in conversation theory, that's what it's all about, is that in conversation theory, you're going to generate new knowledge just in the art of that conversation.
You're absolutely right. And it's about another quality related to this. I talk about critical thinking, but active listening. One of the things that helped me throughout my career is humility. So, not being afraid, I don't want to say, I don't know. I don't know. Could you please explain? I think this is so important. If you want to continuously learn and grow, be humble and don't be afraid to say you don't know. People are willing to help.
I think that's a good address to all of society because it is a human function that we desperately need more of. Humility and being humble in your place and being fair to yourself and to others to say, I don't have the answers. And so now we're talking collaboration, right? So now we have to be open to collaborate in order to do any of the above.
It's interesting. I developed a little model about access to knowledge. It's a little visual where one arrow goes to system, like which system do we use, etc., like browsing, searching, etc. And the other arrow goes to the people. There are three categories of people. The community of practice of your company or enterprise social network, whatever you call it. Okay, so you seek knowledge through these groups. The second one is the community of practice of interest of the industry. And the third one is your own personal network. What I said about this is that you are as strong as your personal trusted network. Because when you need something real deep, you're going to pick up the phone and call a friend of yours that you trust, or not even necessarily a friend, but a person that you trust. When I was a VP of IT in my early days at ST, we had to implement an SAP system, which I had no knowledge of. But I called my counterpart CIO at Siemens, which I knew they were implementing SAP. And I learned from that CIO all the experiences and what was to my vendor. That ability to have a network and be able to call somebody in your network and cultivate that network, because cultivating network is important. Cultivating the network means that you have to be willing to give knowledge to them continuously. You see something that you think this person could use, send them an email, send them a text message with a link to that video and so on. For no reason, for just the reason of sharing. But maybe 10 years down the road, you need that person and you're going to call that person. They'll remember you, and they're willing to help.
So what you're talking about is being the good Samaritan or a good steward. This is stewardship practices. You're feeding as you eat. You are sharing as you learn. You are a combination of things, and you're in community with your community. And that's where I think you're hitting gold, because I think a lot of organizations don't foster that.
Yeah, but I think at the end of the day, you should take responsibility for your own life, and in particular for your own learning. That's something, my network, and I'm a pack rat. There's every time I meet somebody, I put the name of the place and the date into the notes section. And I have people that started my professional career in 1977. So you can imagine how many names I have in a system. Take responsibility for building your network. You don't need a company to tell you what to do.
So you're talking about personal responsibility. That is a piece of good leadership. If you are and I hate to use the term, if you are a master of your domain, then you can be better prepared and ready to roll.
Yeah, it's like any situation in life. We've seen that preparation is a very good thing. It reduces stress, it reduces mistakes. Do not avoid them all the time, but at least it is a great factor of reducing those negative effects in life.
We've wrapped up this show with a whole bunch of elements all balled up into just progress. I'll just label this as personal progress. Takes a lot of work, and it's not easy. And if you don't continue it, if you don't share it, if you don't develop it, then progress will be beyond your reach.
Yes.
I left him speechless.
Yeah, I go back to my passion. Okay, I'm passionate about electronic and software technologies as key enabler to the world progress. And this is why I'm so hungry of learning every day. I actually feed myself in terms of passion. And for me, it's just, being able to reinvent yourself in your career. Top domain right now, which is AI, is something that happened because I'm constantly able to reinvent myself and adapt, learn, and grow with this. It's my way of being happy in life professionally, is that to feed that intellect with continuous learning and thing. And I read not only about AI, I read about biology, I read about many domains. Actually, one of my recommendation is that when you do develop your personal knowledge routine or knowledge hygiene, do it in a way that is very diverse. I have something called TED Tuesday. So every Tuesday at lunch, I watch a TED Talk. I don't select the TED Talk. I go into TED, the application, and say, surprise me. Well, it just tell me how much time do you have? 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And then I learn about things that I would have.
Something totally, yeah, exactly. You're playing knowledge roulette, right? You're just like, I'll take what you send me. I'm open.
I think that there is a value, a very, very important value of diversity of thought. And being able to apply also this to knowledge access and knowledge acquisition and learning is key. The world is so complex right now. Think about what's happening in the war. I have friends that are Russian, and I talk with them to understand how they view things. They're not very happy right now, as you can imagine, but think about what's happening in Palestine and Israel. Understanding the different point of view of those people also, and not going to conclusion immediately. Being able to form your own opinion based on diversity of thoughts is very important.
I can't agree more, my friend, and thank you very much for being an intricate part of our concepts and education and learning around knowledge.
Well, thank you for what you're doing in spreading diversity of thoughts from those people that you interview, and I hope I helped add water to your well.
Ooh, I'm liking that. You've added good water to this well. Thank you for joining this extraordinary journey, and we hope the experiences gained add value to you and yours. If you'd like to contact us, please email byntk@pioneer-ks.org or find us on LinkedIn.